Are you feeling distant in your prayer life? Maybe you've tried to connect with God, but it feels like something is blocking your path. You're not alone. Many of us struggle with distractions, lack of discipline, or even growing sin that makes it harder to stay close to God. But what if the key to unlocking your prayers isn't just about trying harder? What if understanding the real obstacles could transform your connection with Him? Let's dive into the top 5 hidden barriers and discover how to overcome them. We've all been there, prayers that feel unanswered. Moments where we wonder if God is listening. But here's the secret: it's not that God isn't answering, it's that there might be something hindering our connection with Him. We all know that prayer is essential to our relationship with God, but it's so easy to let distractions and barriers creep in. In this video, I want to share with you the top 5 things that can seriously hinder your prayer life and how you can identify and overcome them. You've probably heard that nobody has a perfect prayer life. And I'll admit there are days when it feels like I'm doing better than others, but truthfully, no one ever really figures it all out. It's easy to fall into the mindset that we'll always do better next time, but that can also be an excuse to avoid taking action. If we keep using that excuse, we might never make real improvements. For me, I've realized that one of the best ways to grow in my prayer life is to identify the things that get in the way of my communication with God. And let's face it, sometimes we don't even realize what's hindering us. So let's start by unpacking these obstacles together. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll feel encouraged to make some changes and get closer to God through prayer. Now let's dive right in. Hindrance number 1 is busyness. If we're being honest, we all live busy lives. Our mornings are filled with meetings, school tasks, appointments, and a never-ending list of things that need to be done. And before we know it, the day is over, and we realize we didn't make time for God. But here's the hard truth: it's not that we didn't have time, it's that we didn't prioritize God. You see, busyness is one of the biggest reasons why my own prayer life has suffered at times. I would wake up in the morning with so much to do, and prayer would take a back seat. It's easy to make excuses. We think things like, I don't have time today, or I'm too tired, or even I'll pray tomorrow. But what we fail to realize is that, like in the parable Jesus tells in Luke chapter 14, verses 16 to 20, we can make excuses just like the people in that story. In the parable, a man invites many guests to a feast, but one by one they all make excuses about why they can't attend. One says, I've bought some land and need to go see it. Another says, I just bought oxen and I need to test them. And another one says, I've just gotten married so I can't come. Does this sound familiar? Life gets in the way and we choose work, family, and other commitments over our time with God. The problem is that when we let this busyness take over, we're putting our priorities out of order. We're allowing distractions to come between us and God, and that's where the issue lies. If you find yourself in a place where your prayer life is suffering because of busyness, I want to challenge you to take a step back. Reflect on your daily routine and consider where your priorities really lie. If we're honest, the real issue is not that we don't have time. It's that we haven't made time for God. Think about it. How many times have we said we'll pray, but then we scroll through our phones or get caught up in a task or run off to another meeting? These things are important, but none of them should take priority over spending time with God. So take some time this week to reflect on where your time is being spent. Are there areas of your life where you could cut back and make room for prayer? It's not about being perfect. It's about making prayer a priority. And if you're struggling with this, I encourage you to think about what might be standing in the way of you connecting with God. It might just be a matter of getting your priorities straight. All right, let's keep going. Hindrance number 2 is lack of discipline. Discipline isn't the most exciting word, is it? We all have great intentions. Maybe we even know we should pray more, or maybe we set a goal to pray every morning before we start the day. But when the time comes, we find ourselves distracted or just not following through. For me, I've noticed that lack of discipline is one of the biggest obstacles to maintaining a consistent prayer life. It's easy to let other things get in the way, and before you know it, the day has slipped away without a single moment spent in prayer. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27, Paul shares something really important about discipline. I discipline my body like an athlete training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Paul compares his spiritual discipline to an athlete who trains their body to perform at its best. Think about athletes. They don't just show up to the big game unprepared. they train hard sacrifice and put in the effort to make sure they're ready. It's the same with our prayer life. Discipline requires us to be intentional, to set aside time, and to make prayer a priority even when distractions come up. And let me tell you, I've been there. I'm someone who loves to read comments from our viewers or watch a few quick videos on YouTube. 5 minutes turns into 10, 10 turns into 20, and suddenly an hour has passed. I catch myself and realize I've spent all this time scrolling instead of spending it with God. It's not that watching videos or engaging with our community isn't important. It's just that I allowed my distractions to take control. And honestly, it wasn't that I didn't have time for prayer. It was that I didn't have the discipline to put my phone down and prioritize what mattered most. In the past, I've struggled with discipline, especially when it comes to my morning routine. I'll get caught up in responding to emails or mindlessly scrolling through social media instead of taking a few minutes to pray. And I know I'm not alone in this. We all have something that can distract us, something that steals our focus and keeps us from praying as we should. But it's important to recognize this and then take intentional steps to overcome it. If you're struggling with a lack of discipline in your prayer life, I challenge you to do what I did: start small. You don't need to carve out hours of your day to pray. Just start with a set time, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. It's about making prayer a habit, something you commit to even when you don't feel like it. For me, it's all about setting boundaries and being intentional. For instance, I'll set an alarm for 10:30 a.m. and make sure that for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm not checking my phone or looking at anything else. Instead, I'll sit in silence and spend that time talking to God. It's a simple but powerful way to build discipline. Or if you're more of a night owl, try setting a time before bed to pray, even if it's just to thank God for the day and ask for strength to face tomorrow. I've also set limits on my phone, turning off certain apps during certain hours, so I'm not constantly distracted. It might sound small, but these small decisions add up over time. The key is to make prayer something that becomes as natural as checking your emails or scrolling through Instagram. Let me tell you, if you're serious about growing your prayer life, this kind of discipline is key. It might feel hard at first, but just like any other habit, it gets easier over time. Start by asking yourself, what can I sacrifice for God today? Maybe it's putting down your phone for a few minutes or saying no to something that's distracting you from prayer. Small acts of discipline can make a huge impact. Now let's talk about hindrance number 3, growing sin. Sin is something we all struggle with, and it's a major barrier to a thriving prayer life. The more we give in to sin, the more it feeds our flesh and distances us from God. Galatians chapter 5 verse 17 tells us, "For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish." This verse is so powerful because it reveals the constant battle between our flesh and our spirit. When we give in to sin, we're feeding our flesh. We're allowing temptation to take root, and it's choking the spiritual life within us. And when we're consumed by sin, it becomes harder and harder to pray authentically. We feel shame, guilt, and reluctance to approach God because we know we're not living the way He wants us to. I know this from personal experience. There have been times when I've let sin grow in my life, and it made my prayer life feel distant and cold. It wasn't that I didn't want to pray, it was that I didn't feel worthy. I didn't want to confront the sin in my life, and that made it harder to talk to God. But the key to overcoming this is remembering what the Bible says in Galatians chapter 5 verse 16. "Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." The more we choose to walk in the Spirit, the less we'll give in to our sinful nature. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. One of the best ways to fight against sin is by surrounding yourself with people who will encourage you in your walk with God. Whether it's through prayer with a friend, attending a Bible study, or just finding someone to hold you accountable, these steps can help you stay grounded in the Spirit. If you're struggling with sin that's affecting your prayer life, remember that you don't have to face it alone. Confess your sin to God, ask for His forgiveness, and seek the support of others. The more you walk in the Spirit, the less control sin will have over your life, and the more you'll find freedom in your prayer time. Now moving on to hindrance number 4, losing sight of God's love. This one is close to my heart because I know how easy it is to forget just how much God loves us, especially when life gets busy or things aren't going the way we hoped. I've had days where I've allowed my focus to shift from God's incredible love for me, and when that happens, my prayer life starts to feel more like a task rather than a relationship with a loving Father. In 1 John chapter 3 verse 1 we read, "Behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Let that sink in for a moment. We are called God's children, not because we've earned it, but because He loves us. That's a deep, unconditional love that doesn't depend on what we do or how we perform, but simply on who we are in Him. And this is the love that we get to experience through prayer. Prayer isn't a chore, it's a conversation with our Father who adores us. But the problem is sometimes we turn prayer into a task instead of a blessing. We think of it as something we have to do, something we need to check off our list before moving on with our day. When that happens, we lose the joy of spending time with God, and prayer becomes an obligation rather than a privilege. I've caught myself doing this more times than I care to admit. I'll think I need to pray, but I don't have time, or I'll pray later when I'm feeling more spiritually motivated. And yet the more I push it off, the harder it becomes to pray. Why? Because I'm losing sight of God's love for me. I've also noticed that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or when things aren't going the way I want them to, my tendency is to step away from prayer. I think God must be mad at me for my mistakes, or why would He want to hear from me when I'm not perfect? But when I start to focus on God's love instead of my failures, I'm reminded that He wants to hear from me. He's not waiting for me to get everything right before I come to Him. He simply wants a relationship, a connection, where I can pour out my heart to Him. So if you're struggling with prayer because it's starting to feel like a duty, or if you feel like you're not worthy of God's love, I want to encourage you to shift your perspective. Remember that prayer is a privilege, not a chore. It's an invitation to connect with the God who loves you deeply and intimately. It's not about your performance, but about your heart. Take a moment today to reflect on God's love for you. No matter what's going on in your life, His love remains constant. His love is the foundation of your prayer life. And when you understand and embrace that love, it will completely transform how you approach prayer. Now let's dive into hindrance number 5, creating unnecessary rules for prayer. This one hits home because I've definitely fallen into this trap, more times than I care to admit. We can make prayer way harder than it needs to be. We create all these rules about when, where, and how we should pray. And the next thing we know, prayer starts to feel like a burdensome task instead of a natural part of our relationship with God. In Mark chapter 7, verses 1-2, we read about a group of religious leaders who criticized Jesus' disciples for not following their tradition of washing their hands before eating. They had created all these rituals that were not even part of the original commandments in the Old Testament. And Jesus rebuked them for focusing on man-made traditions instead of the true commands of God. I've noticed that just like the Pharisees, I can create my own rules for prayer. For example, I might think that I need to pray for a certain amount of time, or that I can only pray when I'm in a quiet, distraction-free space. And when I can't meet those expectations, I end up skipping prayer altogether thinking I've failed. But that's not what prayer is about at all. The truth is, prayer doesn't need to fit into a box. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute session where you kneel and say all the right words. It can be as simple as talking to God throughout your day, whether you're driving to work, going for a walk, or even taking a break from your work to ask for His guidance. Prayer is about connection, not about rules. For me, the biggest shift came when I realized that I didn't have to follow some formula or structure to talk to God. I could pray when I felt prompted, whether it was in the morning or in the middle of the day. I could pray out loud or in my head. It didn't matter if I had everything figured out. What mattered was the relationship. So if you're someone who feels like you need to follow a set of rules or guidelines for prayer, I encourage you to let go of that pressure. Keep it simple. Prayer is about connection. You don't need to follow a specific routine or have everything in order to approach God. He's there for you, and He wants to hear from you no matter where you are or what you've been through. In fact, the more we let go of these unnecessary rules, the more natural prayer will become. It will no longer feel like a burden, but like a conversation with a friend who knows and loves you deeply. So to recap, we've discussed busyness, lack of discipline, growing sin, losing sight of God's love, and creating unnecessary rules for prayer. These are the 5 major hindrances that can prevent us from having a healthy, thriving prayer life. But here's the good news. By identifying these obstacles, we can take action. We don't have to let these hindrances control us. We can prioritize God-build discipline, confront sin, embrace His love, and let go of unrealistic expectations. Remember, prayer isn't about being perfect. It's about staying connected to the God who loves you. So take the first step today. Maybe it's as simple as taking 5 minutes to pray or letting go of a rule you've made about how prayer should look. Whatever it is, know that God is waiting to hear from you. As we wrap up this series, I want to offer some final thoughts on how to move forward in your prayer life. We've already talked about some of the major hindrances to prayer: busyness, lack of discipline, growing sin, losing sight of God's love, and creating unnecessary rules for prayer. But now let's take a moment to reflect on the path forward. If you've found yourself struggling with any of these obstacles, it's not too late to turn things around. You can take intentional steps to reconnect with God and restore your prayer life. The first thing I want to encourage you with is that it's okay if your prayer life isn't perfect. In fact, it will never be perfect as long as we're on this side of heaven. And that's okay. What matters is the desire in your heart to grow closer to God, to communicate with Him, and to seek His presence. Prayer isn't a contest to see who can pray the longest or the most eloquently. It's about intimacy with God, and that takes time, patience, and a willingness to be real with Him. Sometimes we get caught up in the idea of getting it right and forget that God just wants us to come as we are. If you've been feeling guilty because your prayer life isn't where you want it to be, let go of that shame. God isn't disappointed in you. He loves you, and He is always ready to meet you where you are. So if you're ready to start making changes and overcoming the hindrances in your prayer life, here's a practical step-by-step approach to help you move forward. Step 1. Identify and reflect. The first step is to take a moment to identify what's truly hindering your prayer life. Is it busyness? Are you caught in a cycle of distractions and never finding time to pray? Or maybe it's a lack of discipline where you keep putting it off or getting sidetracked. Reflect on the areas we've discussed and ask yourself where you've been struggling. Don't rush this process. Take some time to sit quietly and listen to God. Ask Him to reveal any barriers in your life that are keeping you from connecting with Him. Step 2. Prioritize prayer. Once you've identified the barriers, the next step is to make a conscious decision to prioritize prayer. This might mean adjusting your schedule or cutting back on activities that aren't adding value to your spiritual growth. It could be as simple as setting aside 10 minutes in the morning or evening to spend time with God. The key is consistency. The more you make prayer a part of your routine, the easier it becomes. And don't worry about how long your prayers are. God is just looking for sincerity. Whether it's a short prayer in the morning or a moment of gratitude before bed, what matters is that you're choosing to communicate with Him. Step 3. Build spiritual discipline. Building discipline doesn't happen overnight, but it's essential for a thriving prayer life. Start small. Maybe you decide to turn off your phone for 15 minutes each day to pray, or set an alarm in the middle of the day to remind you to check in with God. Like an athlete training their body, it's about developing a habit that becomes second nature. And while discipline is important, don't let it become a rigid checklist. Prayer is a personal relationship, not a task to complete. Be flexible, but stay committed. Step 4. Embrace God's love. As we discussed, one of the most significant hindrances to prayer is losing sight of God's love. If you've been feeling distant or disconnected, remind yourself of God's overwhelming love for you. He's not waiting for you to have everything together before you approach Him. He loves you unconditionally, and prayer is simply a way to deepen that relationship. Next time you pray, focus on the fact that you're talking to your Father who loves you deeply. Allow that love to draw you near. Step 5. Let go of the rules. Remember that prayer doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need to follow a specific formula or meet certain expectations for God to hear you. The beauty of prayer is that it's flexible. It can be spontaneous, simple, and real. You can pray while walking, driving, or even sitting in your car during your lunch break. Let go of the pressure to make it look a certain way. The goal is connection, not perfection. As you move forward, remember that there is no perfect formula for prayer. It's about showing up and being present with God, even if it's just for a few moments each day. And if you slip up or miss a day, don't beat yourself up. Just pick up where you left off and keep going. The most important thing is that you keep showing up. Also, don't forget to surround yourself with others who are on the same journey. Whether it's joining a Bible study group, praying with a friend, or finding an accountability partner, having a community can be such a huge encouragement. When we're together in this walk, we can hold each other up and pray for one another. It's in these moments of community that we often feel God's presence the most. Finally, always remember that prayer is a gift, not a duty. It's an invitation to experience God's love, guidance, and peace. When you approach prayer with a heart of gratitude and surrender, it will become a beautiful and transformative part of your life. To wrap things up, I want to remind you that prayer is all about the relationship. The more you prioritize it, the more you'll experience God's presence and grow closer to Him. Don't let the obstacles stand in your way. Take a deep breath, remove the pressure, and just talk to God. He's always ready to listen, and He loves you more than you can imagine. As we come to the final part of this series, I want to leave you with some powerful truths to encourage and empower you as you continue your prayer journey. We've covered the 5 hindrances to prayer: busyness, lack of discipline, growing sin, losing sight of God's love, and creating unnecessary rules. And we've discussed practical steps you can take to overcome them. But now I want to talk about the deeper, lasting impact that a vibrant prayer life can have on your relationship with God. Prayer is not just about asking God for things. It's about connecting with Him on a deeply personal level. It's about opening your heart and mind to God, allowing His presence to fill you and transform you from the inside out. And as you begin to prioritize prayer and address the hindrances in your life, you will start to see the fruit of that relationship. You'll find peace in His presence, guidance in His word, and strength for the challenges you face. You see, prayer isn't just a spiritual practice, it's a lifeline. It's how we communicate with our Creator, our Father, and our friend. It's in those quiet moments of prayer that we can hear God's voice, receive His comfort, and be reminded of His promises. And when you start to experience that, prayer becomes something you look forward to, not because it's a rule to follow, but because it's a privilege and a joy. One of the biggest breakthroughs I've had in my own prayer life is learning that prayer doesn't have to be perfect. We often think we need to have all the right words or say the right thing. But God is more concerned with our hearts than our words. He doesn't need us to be eloquent or polished in our prayers. He just wants us to come as we are honest, open, and willing to listen. When we approach prayer with that kind of openness, we create space for God to speak to us in ways that go beyond our understanding. But here's the thing, God's timing is perfect. Sometimes when we pray, it feels like nothing is happening. We don't always see immediate answers, and that can be discouraging. But we have to trust that God is working in ways we can't always see. Just because we don't get an answer right away doesn't mean He isn't listening. Remember, God's ways are higher than our ways, and His timing is always right. What we think we need might not always be what He knows is best for us. If you've been praying for something specific and haven't seen an answer yet, I encourage you to hold on to hope. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep trusting. God is faithful, and He will answer in His perfect time. And even if His answer is different from what you expected, trust that He knows what's best for you. Here's a thought: prayer also helps us align our hearts with God's will. When we spend time in His presence, we begin to see things from His perspective. Our desires start to shift, and we start to pray not just for what we want, but for what He wants. That's when our prayers become truly powerful, not because they're selfish, but because they align with God's purpose for our lives. I've found that when I pray more regularly, I start to see changes in my own heart. I become more patient, more compassionate, and more aware of God's work in my life and the lives of others. Prayer isn't just about asking for things. It's about building that relationship, and through it, God begins to transform us from the inside out. You might be wondering, what do I do if I'm still struggling to make prayer a regular part of my life? The answer is simple: keep going. Even when it feels hard, even when distractions arise, or when you feel like your prayers aren't being answered, just keep showing up. God honors that faithfulness. There will be seasons when prayer feels dry, but in those seasons, trust that God is still at work within you. The beauty of prayer is that it's not about perfection. It's about the process. God is more interested in your heart than your performance. And as you grow in your prayer life, don't be afraid to experiment. Maybe you're used to praying in silence, but try praying aloud for a change. Maybe you've only been praying in the morning, but try setting aside a time at night before bed. It doesn't have to be complicated. Find what works for you. Prayer is personal, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The goal is to create a rhythm that feels natural and sustainable for your life. If you've been discouraged, I want to remind you of something: God loves you unconditionally. His love doesn't depend on how well you pray or how much time you spend praying. His love for you is constant, and nothing can change that. So don't let guilt or shame prevent you from connecting with Him. If you've been away from prayer for a while, it's okay to start fresh. God is always waiting with open arms. Finally, I want to encourage you to make prayer a daily habit, not as a religious duty, but as an opportunity to grow closer to God. Prayer is one of the most powerful tools we have for deepening our relationship with God. It's how we hear from Him, share our hearts with Him, and experience His presence in our lives. So as you move forward in your walk with God, I pray that prayer becomes something you cherish. May it be a time of connection, peace, and transformation in your life. You don't have to have it all figured out, just take it one step at a time and trust that God will meet you right where you are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope these insights have been helpful to you. If you found this video encouraging, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need it. And remember, God is always with you, and He is always ready to hear your prayers. Keep pressing forward, stay encouraged, and continue to grow in your relationship with Him. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video. Prayer is such a powerful gift and open door to connect with a loving God who's always ready to listen. As we've explored today, the key isn't perfection, but persistence in prioritizing that time with Him. So take a deep breath, trust in God's timing, and keep pressing forward in your prayer journey. If this video has encouraged you, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more uplifting content. Let's continue to grow together in our faith, one prayer at a time. Stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next video.